Welcome, everybody, to the WSG Virtual Employers Online. My name is Lisa, a senior consultant with the Art of Career, and I'll be your host for today's Q&A session. Joining me today are speakers from the online conference. We have Mr. Felix Lian, Regional Managing Director from Klingspor, Singapore. Hello, Felix. And we also have Mr. Peter Bendel, Managing Director from Aero Inspect Asia. Hello, Peter.
Hello.
Hello. And we also have Eileen, HR consultant and organizational psychologist with the Art of Career. Hi, Eileen.
Hi.
Well, thank you all for submitting your questions and your comments online. We will be addressing them today in this discussion, so stay tuned and don't go away. All right, so let's start with you, Felix. Now, you mentioned in your talk that past performance is no guarantee for future results. And our attendee is saying, but we have to depend on it as a start. So what's your take on that?
Yes, thank you, Lisa. Past performance is not the indicator for future, for sure, but that is the base element or criteria that we are looking for. So when we are looking for this person to come into the organization, we want to make sure that he has a suitable track record and an indicator of success when we bring them on board. But not forgetting that in this forum, we really would just want to remind the recruiter or the hiring manager that don't just take that as the base value. You also need to look at the success profile, whether or not this person may fit into the organization culture. After all, this will be a new operating environment or culture that this person will be entering into. And the recruiting manager is the insider. He or she knows much better than anybody else whether or not this past performance can be replicated in this new environment. This is really what we are trying to point across here.
Okay, so you're saying don't just depend on past performance. That's basically what you're saying.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
All right. Thank you. And Peter, over to you. You mentioned that the job description is the foundation of your hiring process. And one of our attendees mentioned that, we have difficulty in creating job descriptions because most of our managers are not good writers. So what's your recommendation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I find this can be tricky as well. So I find it's best to stick to simple descriptive language.
Okay.
Avoid using overly complicated sentences full of buzzwords or jargon, and ensure that each sentence matters. Also, when you're writing it, don't oversell or exaggerate the role, as this will create a mismatch of expectations between the employer and the candidates.
True. Yes. Okay, so keep it short and simple and don't exaggerate. Okay, fabulous. Yes. Okay, and Eileen, over to you. One of the attendees is saying, how does one hire in current COVID-19 situation where there's a ban on physical travel and you have to make assessments over video? So how do you do that?
Thanks for the question. I believe these days, access to digital tools are so within everybody's reach. For example, we could use Skype. We can also use video chats on any of the chat function on your phone. And Zoom is very much accessible as well, such as, this forum. But one thing in my profession, what I've realized is when you use video as a platform to interview, we actually get a lot closer to the candidate. So things like, for example, facial expression. Psychologists like myself would also observe that. So we would look for things like whether, the candidate actually smiles. You look at the direction of where the eyes are looking. And then, you also basically look at, apart from the facial expression, you would also look at you would focus on the content. I think content itself, is quite medium or platform agnostic, which means in person or over the video, you get to hear the same content. So that actually has no difference or no bearing whatsoever. And then the last one is really on the general appearance, whether the individual actually dressed well and all. Yeah, I hope that helps.
All right. So actually you find that video interviews can be even more intimate and you'll be able to assess quite a bit from there. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you, Eileen, for all that different pointers. All right. So over back to you, Felix, talking about profiling tools, right? One of our attendees is asking, what profiling tool do you use as an organization?
Well, That's a good question, actually. I'm not the best qualified person to answer that, actually. But I think the key to that question is that you should use some kind of profiling tool. You cannot just based on reading from the job description and then knowing what is required for the skill sets. But using a profiling tool such as that, what I'm familiar with or what our organization has used, such as DISC or MBTI, these ones, what we want to do is to uncover the stuff or the DNA or rather the personality that may be lacking in the job description. So these tools, if conducted and administered by a trained person, it should be able to uncover stuff that sometimes the hiring manager fails or refuses to see. So I guess here the key point is that to use some form of a personality assessment tool to uncover stuff that by a trained personnel. So this is what we are putting across.
Okay, all right. So thanks for that. And I think a follow-up question is, if a person is studying psychology, will the profiling tool still work? So i.e., if somebody who knows how these things work, would they be able to cheat? I suppose that's the question.
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, Lisa. So yes and no. Yes, in a way, because then the person would have know the ins and outs and how to navigate through all these questions, through and forth. But no, in a way that the person doesn't know how the organization that this person is coming in, how is the environment. So in a way, you still be able to depend on it in the sense that whether or not this person is really trying to manipulate the assessment or true personality will surface from there.
Right.
So it's a yes and no question, really.
Yes and no. All right. Maybe we should ask the organization psychologist. So Eileen, what's your take? Anything to add?
Felix is correct because psychologists are also humans. And what I've suggested all the time is to put the candidate in a very relaxed position. When the candidate is relaxed, like you and I, our true self will surface. But one suggestion which any interviewer can practice is to observe for consistency, because whatever stories they tell or whatever behavior they demonstrate, look for consistency in throughout the entire interview, before and after.
Right. Okay, that's very good. And then, in fact, there was a question also on basic profiling tools that our attendees asked. I think everyone's a bit concerned about cost these days. What would be a good set of basic profiling tools we can use that's both inexpensive and effective?
Okay, there's actually a lot of free tools that are available out there on the internet. If you do a search, you can find that. But knowing which tool to use is important, and understanding, what sort of results you're looking for is also important. So maybe one easy way to start is to use a profiling. Big 5 personality type is by far the oldest kind of definition in terms of personality traits. And just a quick one, if I may. If you think of the acronym OCEAN, OCEAN, each of these alphabet actually stands for something. And I think it's good enough for us to start. O stands for openness. So the degree of openness can help us to understand whether the individual has a closed mindset, has an open mindset. And you can do that by ask for opinions. Everybody has got their own opinions. Hear what they say. C stands for conscientiousness, or whether tenacity, whether the individual is tenacious, do they give up easily? So that can also give you some clues as to the job. And then E talks about extroversion, whether that individual prefer to focus on the surrounding, the environment surrounding them or within themselves. And then you've got A, which is agreeableness. Agreeableness could be a good factor when you work in a very highly regulated environment, and all you need is not somebody coming in with crazy ideas, innovative ideas. I like that, but this is not the place. We just need people to ensure that they stick within the rules because it's required. And then the last one is neuroticism, which means anybody who gets easily excited. So you can see excitement can come positively and negatively. But in a service environment, somebody who's handling an irate customer, you need somebody who's a little calm and being able to then, calm the choppy waters and focus on the situation. OCEAN, Ocean.
Okay.
Something to start with.
Wow, thank you, Eileen, for a very quick lesson. The ocean, right? OCEAN. All right, we'll have to bear that in mind. So thanks for that. Talking about cost, and over to you, Peter. You talked about front-loaded cost of using an independent assessor versus the cost of a mismatch hire. And we have quite a few feedback from our audience about this. If you may bear with me, I'm going to read out about 3 comments. Number 1, someone said, may I know what is the cost of engaging an individual assessor? That's one. And then the second person said, hiring third-party assessors first requires time to search for one, and cost doesn't come cheap. Second, you have to spend time with them to get them to understand your company and culture and what you really want. And third, their staff will change as well, just as your employees. So what I'm trying to say is that they are equally time consuming, but perhaps they have their set of expertise that we don't have. Okay, and bear with me, the third one. While it is costly with conventional hiring in terms of time and money, cost of hiring an HR company to assist in the hiring process is also not that cheap and relatively more expensive in terms of money paid up front. Most SMEs would rather refine their hiring process than further refine. Then they may take longer time, but they will not spend as much as hiring an HR company. What are your thoughts on that?
Excellent. All very good questions. So I'll take them one at a time. First of all, the front-loaded cost. It all depends on the person's level within the company. And a brief rule of thumb that I use is somewhere between a quarter and a half of a month's salary for the front-loaded cost to pay the independent assessors to assist you with the job description and the interview process.
Okay, very good.
The next was about the time to search for the independent assessors and to build a relationship with them, that I think the person posing the question felt that it was the same level of effort to find independent assessors as it is to find a candidate. So as an SME, we use these guys because they have a skill set that we don't have. And as an SME, again, I gravitate towards other SMEs. So that's my recommendation there is find either an independent consultant or an SME where you can deal directly with the owner of the business, because there's a lot less turnover there and than you would have with a larger organization. So that's what I find works best for us. And with the cost of the conventional hiring and developing our own procedures, for that, I would say, you can't beat expertise. If you're an SME hiring somebody once, maybe twice a year, and you're going to refine your process through that to do it yourself, it may take many years until you have a fully robust system which will include enough organizational psychology to help you eliminate mismatch hires. So, I mean, yes, refine your own process, but I find it best to leave the technical side of the organization psychology to the experts so that we can focus on what we do best rather than having to do a lot of research and a lot of study into the methodologies of the interviews, that it's just in time and money, it's easier for us to outsource that niche bit of the hiring process.
Right. Okay. Wow. Thank you so much, Peter. So many good points there. Everything from your estimate in terms of how much you're willing to budget for your front-loaded cost to actually time taken to find that SME, and then good advice about finding a similar SME where you're dealing directly with the owner of the business, so there's less turnover. So thank you so much for that. All right, so Felix, one of the attendees agreed with you, said they fully agreed that profiling by a qualified third party is important to get a right candidate. Do you have anything else to add to that?
I guess I'm just speaking from my personal experience is that you should look into this process as an integrated one rather than a separated one. So if there are not many organizational psychologists who can do this very well, at the same time has got a function of a recruitment. So if you can integrate them, if there's a company who does that, then I think that would be everything under one roof. But essentially, we are looking into integrating these two processes into one. And then be consistent about it, because this person who does the interview, perhaps you can also think about having him or her to do the onboarding At the same time, like my organization, Kingsport, what we did, we used the same consultant to do a 360 profiling for all other staff. So after 1 year, 2 years, we like to see if there's a shift in terms of these cultural behavior, and how do we need to adapt. So, but essentially in the initial stage, just let me add the last part of it is we are really looking for derailers. We want to look into what is the no-no. So things that we should not be introducing into our organization. This is my point.
Right. Wow. That's really, really good. Yeah. And Eileen, anything to add on your end?
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. And actually, the main thing here is I totally agree with Peter as well, because when you look at the cost itself, cost from an SME point of view is very, very affordable. So yes, you need to look for the A team. I always have this analogy. When you go to a brand new place where you don't know your route and you have the possibility of hiring a car and you have the map. But thing is, who knows all the shortcuts? Taxi drivers. So you probably have to pay for your ride to find out where those routes are. And similar for, finding somebody who understands profiling and all that. Find one, this is a tip, find one that will actually educate your people, because it's not difficult to understand. Find one who can then train your HR team and even train the hiring managers to understand. There's a lot of stuff that they can do on their own, and leave the more complex cases to the experts going forward. So one price, you get free training, and you also get free help, I suppose. I mean, that would be my personal recommendation. Yeah.
Okay, so negotiate for a really good deal, get a full package deal, right? Okay. All right. So thank you, Eileen, for that advice. Now, this is in a sense a bit of a trade-off, right? I mean, in terms of, but what you're saying is that spend more time, to Peter's point, on what you are good at rather than things that it's not your area of expertise. And just talking about trade-offs and dilemma, let's move on to this topic about hire fast versus hire right, right? And this is something, Felix, that one of the attendees asked you. The conflict in hiring fast versus hiring right is the need for someone to do the job at hand, and many times the line managers are very unwilling to wait, and the backlog is piling up and resulting in hiring just the best candidate so they can get, and may not be the right profile for the team or the organization. So what's your take on that?
This is a really, really tough question, So, but again, we can be looking into hiring fast. Does it also correlate to firing fast or offloading fast? So you if you start to sense that in your past track record, when you don't do your diligence well enough, and then you start to realize that you're also asking people to leave, or the people are leaving quite quickly. So I guess the answer is out there now, So I would guess that a little more weight, a little bit more due diligence, a little bit more in-depth and insights will probably save you a lot more recruitment costs. Yeah. Okay. So again, I just qualify myself in saying that the recruitment part is only the first part of it. You also need to have a very good onboarding, and then you cannot just depend on the recruitment part is done, the person is there, and then everything will work well. So it is actually evolving step by step. Yeah, but just to answer the question, I personally don't agree in hiring fast. I have some vacancy that I've kept more than 6 months because I don't agree that we get enough qualified or suitable candidates. So I personally will go for hire the right rather than hire fast.
I see. Okay. Wow. Okay. Thank you, Felix, for that. And Peter, Peter, you said the same thing in your talk. And I remember you say that line managers are often blinkered by the need to hire now. So what has been your experience?
Yeah, I think the key to it is to take a step back. That's you as in your role, and if you're not the hiring manager, and the hiring manager, and to take a step back to get a different perspective on the candidates, and to make sure that they're the most suitable candidates for the role. You need to get independent advice from someone with no skin in the game. So as Felix was saying about the hiring fast, I don't think that's ever the option. While there can be looming deadlines, you need to be careful that you're not just hiring for that deadline, because then you might end up with a mismatched employee, which can have a more long-term negative effect in the company than missing your short-term looming deadline.
Okay. So Peter, have you had experience where you hired someone fast and had to fire fast as well?
Thankfully enough, so far, we have not had any since we implemented our new system.
Okay.
I'm sure that as we grow and we hire more people, there'll be mismatches, but what we're trying to do is minimize the possibility of a mismatch. Now, it's a double-edged sword because if we're overcautious, we risk missing out on good candidates. For when people, if we're still undecided on people, we need to go back to the basics and trust our instincts. So there is a possibility of mismatches, but we really have put in procedures in place to avoid the hire fast because we find that is it's just too risky for having mismatches join our organization.
Right. Okay. All right. So you've got some discipline put in place. So that's really good. Yeah. Good to hear that you have not had much experience having to fire fast as well, which I like Felix's analogy there. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit over to you, Eileen. Let's talk about team profiles, right? You mentioned that the heterogeneous team generally perform better than a homogeneous team. And one of the attendees is in total agreement, saying diversity brings in new ideas and different perspectives. Now, the question is whether it brings it out really depends on the existing team and a new hire, whether they are able to embrace changes. So, and a similar question, right? Do you think starting a heterogeneous team is better than starting the other way around? Because the moment you bring someone from the outside of the pack in, the newbie cannot adjust anymore because everyone in the team is the same. So what's your take on that?
Thanks. Can I answer the second question first?
Yeah.
Because that question, when it was first posted on the page, it got me thinking, really, which one would you do? I would still recommend hiring and setting up a heterogeneous team if you have a chance, because of the oldest experiment that was conducted is called the ASH experiment. If you watch that video, you would realize that it's very, very tough for somebody who has a very different profile and is outnumbered, and he is the only one against all. At the end of the day, even though you want diversity, this individual will eventually end up doing what we call groupthink. And they end up wanting to be accepted by the group. But then that being said, if we are serious about having the first person who is very diverse to join the team, we need to plan a very robust onboarding program. To Felix's point, when he was answering a previous question, you really need a very robust onboarding program, which means this onboarding program, a lot of us tend to think that the onboarding program is only for the onboarder, but it's not. So that is linked to the first point about team profiles. We need to prepare the team that who's coming in is going to be, different from you, but yet we are the same. So think global, think for the company, act local because you are who you are. So don't make your difference be a problem. In fact, make your difference be an advantage. I hope that answers the question.
In a nutshell, if I can summarize, it's really all about the onboarding, and not just onboarding the newbie, but get the entire team to be ready for the onboarding process as well. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Correct.
All right. Yeah. So, and I know that Felix and Peter, both of you have also made mention about team profiling as well. Peter, I think you made mention about that sometimes it's actually an opportunity to fill in the gaps, right? So, and anything to add from your experience there?
Not much to add now. I think Eileen covered it exceptionally well. So we used the profiling, as you mentioned, to fill in the gaps. So that meant we had to get all of our team assessed before we start building the profile of our candidates. And then again, it feeds back into the job description where we have assessed what gaps we have, and then we use that to like I say, put together a jigsaw then in our job description to fill in the gaps that we need.
Yeah, but it seems like a tall order, right? You have all these job descriptions, all these things, and then it needs to fill in the gap as well. Have you been so able to tick all the boxes, or has it been some sort of a compromise?
It's a compromise. We'll never get 100% everything and you get the perfect candidate that's going to solve all our problems. But what we try and do is we use the opportunity of hiring candidates to do as best as we can to complement the team that we already have. Okay,
very good. Thank you. And Felix, anything to add on your end?
Yes, I would just like to offer maybe just a summarized 3-pointer. I guess we really want to say that we want to add the criteria not just on job description hiring, but also add on the success profiling too as a part of the hiring process. And number 2 is that we also want to look at the team profile. Just that how is this person is going to function within this team. Yeah, and last but not least is that we have to look at it as a balanced scorecard. It's not just one department by itself, but a couple of we can never be able to find the perfect candidate and tick all the boxes and checklists. But we just want to see what is the balance from a perspective. How is it going to work from not just job description perspective, but also the profile that is required in this organization to make it work. And from the team perspective, how does the team going to react with this new entry of team members and in the long run, and how do we want to onboard and also evolve within the team as we move along. So it is really just a balanced scorecard. So number 1, add on the criteria of not just job description, but also profiling, and not only just the individual, but also the team. And last but not least, have a holistic view rather than just hiring from that position perspective.
Okay, thank you so much, Felix, for that. Back to you, Eileen. I think there was some talk, because you mentioned a lot about this thing called serious games, right? And our audience is actually interested whether you have any sample of serious games as a culture fit simulation that they could use. And I'll add this in for them. They want it to be cost effective, given the theme.
That seems to be a theme.
It's very evident. So I'm putting it in there even though it wasn't.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot. In fact, what I've included in the handouts is on page 16 of the handout.
Yep.
There are 2 slides there. If you look at the upper slide, it actually talks about some of the attributes that you can access by playing different kind of serious games. So, for example, there is an organization that we are helping, and every year we would be working with their young talent, and it is just putting them through a very simple thing such as going through escape room. So for some of us, if we are familiar with that, it is putting you go into a room, you have to solve the mystery, and by solving the first clue, it will lead you to a next clue. And then you're only given an hour to get out, sort of break out of jail kind of thing. But then therein lies lots and lots of opportunities to observe many things. You can observe how an individual conducts himself or herself. You can also observe how the team actually comes together, for team orientation, individual orientation. One of the attribute which I put in there is also, curiosity. So how curious is the individual on finding the clues? There are many things to me. There's one particular case that I will never forget. There is an individual who is, he is so smart. He actually cracked pretty much all the codes within the first minute. But because of his lack of confidence, he has no confidence in selling his solution. He's so afraid. With the first objection, he recoils and then he doesn't speak up anymore. But at the end of the day, he's the one who keeps coming up with the answer. So that was the observation I shared with the individual. And the team also realized that they need to change as well. They need to embrace someone who comes up with a different answer. So, this is just one example to show that it's not so much the game itself. Yeah. We need to first figure out what is it that we want to assess. And then there are tons of games out there. Even playing, Lego and Jenga and all that, there are so many. I think I better stop there. I can go on and on and on.
Yes, in fact, I would say that maybe we need to think a little bit differently now because of the fact that we can't have physical contact. So maybe you will have to find other games that's online.
Oh,
maybe online games.
Even more. Yes, absolutely. There are so many online. Yeah. There are many online games that bring us together as a group. Okay. And we can look at some games that allow us to put them into teams, some individual games where you keep improving your own best score. So these are some of the things that we can look at. And all these games are also accessible on the phone. So you can track their behaviors throughout. As long as you're able to take a recording and then just track how everybody behaves, that would be a good one.
Okay,
Yep.
Maybe that will be the next talk for you to tell us give us some good examples.
Some games, yep. There's lots.
All right, well, let's moving on to the final question already. So I'll start with you, Peter. So one of the attendees was asking you, can you elaborate a little bit more how a recruitment agency can add value to your hiring process?
Yes. So I found that the recruitment agencies have a very large pipeline of candidates that they can offer. So we've only been in operation in Singapore for 6 years. So during that time, we've been building our network, but it can be very challenging for us to get into the aerospace engineering firms that are based in Singapore because they seem to be quite a closed shop. So for us to build our pipeline is very challenging. So that's where we felt that the recruitment agencies were very beneficial to us. While we weren't using them to do our interviewing process or our independent assessments, the pipeline of CVs that they could then feed us was quite good.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that, Peter. So you use them pretty much for your pipeline of candidates coming through for your recruitment process.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And Felix, over to you. What is the best solution if the mentor seems to be the problem?
Oops.
I guess yes, I read that question. I guess where the question is coming from is that everything went well in the beginning. During the recruitment, everything was okay. It fit the profile. Even maybe I would assume that also the team profile as well. But eventually, and then people change along the time. So that's why in my short answer to it is that we should really not stop short at just at the recruitment stage, but continuously we have to do a profiling. In my organization, we try to do a 360 every 2 years or so, just to see if there's any changes. And more importantly, of course, we do accept people change, but we need to have a certain rules of engagement as far as when you are coming into this organization is concerned. What are the no-nos? So I guess it's a ground rules that somebody up there, the top management has to put their foot into and say that, look, this is the generally accepted behavior, and along the years, this is working fine with us. And then if this happens to be, then the person has to jump in and say, look, this is your yellow card now. You can't do things like that. So I think the influencer the influencee has to be protected in a way that there must be some form of ground rules. So like I always say, the ROE, the rules of engagement, has to be enforced and also, of course, adapted along the years. That would be my response to that.
Okay, all right. So you okay? That's fabulous. So Eileen, over to you. So one of the question was, can you advise what would be a substitute for video realistic job previews? I think you mentioned about that. Since not all companies are able to produce videos. So what's your suggestion?
If videos are not affordable or accessible, we can always do up an article where colleagues who are already in the job, who are doing similar role, to give the future or potential candidate an idea of what the job entails. So you can do that, or you can include pictures. So pictures can also be shown to give the potential candidate an idea of what the job entails. So, and then maybe even customer accolades that can give a more complete and holistic one. I think a lot of individuals invariably, have an idea from the job description, but that's not enough, right? Because those are just words, and we tend to misinterpret the words and the meaning. And, all of us tend to want to think the best of the role, but it's good to also give different perspective.
All right. So instead of using videos, you're saying other mediums like write-ups and photos and things like that could also help to
Correct.
give a perspective of what the role is. Okay, that's really good. Okay, we're kind of really to the end of our Q&A session, but I want to give our speakers here an opportunity for any parting words that you want to give to our audience. Anything? We'll start with you, Peter. Any parting words?
No, I think it's all been summed up. It was an absolute pleasure doing the recording session and the Zoom session. So thank you very much for everybody who's tuned in. And I look forward to working with Eileen, yourself, Lisa, and Felix in the future.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Thank you. And Felix, any parting words from you?
Yeah, same here. I really enjoyed this session. I hope that our advice is of some use and then also some pointers for other people. Just one small point is that we have to also, it was not covered in this forum, but we have to also take note that the millennials that are coming into this work organization are a little bit I would say very different, in terms of their mindset and attitude. So I guess it's a learning process. So it's not having such to stop short at this, but then the process needs to evolve, as I always mention. So I just want to end up by saying that the world out there is very different. Even today, now nobody has ever thought 3 months ago that we'll be doing a forum like this. So I guess we have to take a change as a constant from now on.
All right. Okay. If I can steal a term from WSG, adapt and grow, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for that, Felix. And parting words from you, Eileen?
Yeah. Maybe there's one thing that I would say, don't start looking for candidates when you need them. Start looking for candidates, when you don't need them. But of course, we are not going to just look for everyone, all and sundry for all positions. Just take a look at some of your critical ones, and then you'll be very relaxed, and there's no ulterior motive for that meeting. Then you really see the true side of everybody. So in other words, it's an ongoing process. That's the only advice I would give, right? And don't let the challenge of not meeting face to face be a hindrance, because I think I like what Felix said about the younger generation coming in. They are more savvy, and I think they hook on to technology easier and faster. And why not? Let's just not let that hamper us. Thanks for hosting this.
Thank you so much, all our speakers. And thank you, audience, for watching to the very end. I really hope you enjoyed this session. If you've missed any of the talks of any of our speakers, you can still watch them at the replay section of the platform, and just choose replay and you'll be able to see everything all over again. So thanks for watching, and goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.